Yo, what is up, Utility Sports crew? Today's video is going to be a team mock draft for Jacksonville. I'm really excited to do this because I am a Jacksonville Jaguar fan. And at the number one pick, I think it's pretty clear and obvious what they need to do. Trevor Lawrence is the best prospect in the entire class coming out of college. I think a lot of people really liken him to Andrew Luck. I think he's kind of his own breed. He's got the 6'6" frame, he's got a really good arm, a very good leader, and he's a proven winner at Clemson. And I'm really excited for this, just considering Jacksonville has not had very, very good quarterbacks in their history. Mark Brunell is their best quarterback in team history, and a lot of people will consider him not a great player at this point. They've had so many bad quarterbacks like Blaine Gabbert, Blake Bortles, and the list goes on. Hopefully, this pick can kind of change that entire narrative for the franchise. I love Trevor Lawrence as a prospect. I'm super excited to see him in the teal and black. So there's a lot to like about him, and I'm super pumped to get this going. At pick 25, I think there's quite a bit of needs that they need to address, obviously, coming off of a 1-15 season. Now we have the quarterback. We have to consider that tackle spot. Cam Robinson was franchise tagged this offseason. Hopefully by July, they can have a longer term deal figured out if they want to bring him back. I don't see that entirely likely. I think they were just kind of buying themselves time so they can maybe patch other positions. Obviously, the wide receiver position could be seen as a need. Laviska Shenault and DJ Chark are locks as starters, but there's that third piece that you're kind of missing. Colin Johnson flashed a little bit last year, the 6'6" wideout from Texas. So kind of looking at what is available, I think safety is arguably the second biggest need behind that quarterback spot. I think Trayvon Merrick out of TCU is the pick. You put him alongside of Rayshon Jenkins, and I really like that for Jacksonville. At the next spot, 33, this is kind of when we can look at that tackle spot. Liam Eichenberg, Dylan Radins, both of those guys are formidable options, but we also have to look at that wide receiver spot. Kadarius Toney is still available. He's very, very similar to how Laviska Shenault plays, and I'm not sure if that's exactly what you're looking for at that spot. I really like Kadarius Toney, but he is very, very similar in terms of how him and Laviska play. They're both going to have to work out of the slot quite a bit. So I think honestly, if we're being completely transparent with ourselves, I think Dylan Radins probably makes the most sense for Jacksonville. You have to get that long-term left tackle option. Him at North Dakota State, he was phenomenal, played with Trey Lance. And now we're getting to that pick 45. Now, pick 45 is kind of an interesting spot because you have to consider tight end. Pat Freiermuth is still here. Brevin Jordan is still here. Those are two options that I think are very, very realistic, considering Jacksonville did not go after the big name free agent tight ends. The guys like Jonnu Smith, Hunter Henry, they all went early in free agency. Jacksonville kind of sat back in the weeds and kind of watched the whole situation play out. Maybe Trent Baalke was thinking, we don't want to go ahead and address that tight end spot in free agency. We can just wait for the draft. I think that's very likely what it was. Obviously, they prioritized spending, money along that defensive line. I also think let's take a look at that wide receiver spot. Rondale Moore is still available. Mari Rodgers, Elijah Moore. Those are pretty interesting options. Once again, you kind of run into that same issue, them guys working out of the slot. I think Rondale Moore would be phenomenal out of the slot, but at this point, we do have to look at that tight end spot. It is an absolute must for Jacksonville. I think Pat Freiermuth would be the selection if this were Jacksonville. I personally wouldn't take him at that spot, but I'm trying to go off of what is the most realistic options for Jacksonville. Freiermuth can be a red zone threat. He definitely has the frame for it, and he's one of the best run blocking tight ends in the class. He really does a good job holding his own in that regard. At 65, now this is kind of where it gets interesting because at this point we have addressed some of the needs. I am actually very shocked that Wyatt Davis is still here. Why is he still here? Obviously, the simulation played out and he was not selected, but this is realistic in the NFL because of his current injury. I think he could drop possibly to that third round if the injury scares some people. Javon Holland is still here. That would have been nice value if we would have ultimately held off at that safety spot. I think wide receiver Tylan Wallace could definitely he could line out wide and be that second option in the pass game, possibly third option. It depends on where you view Laviska Shenault, but I think Wyatt Davis could be phenomenal on the interior of that offensive line for Jacksonville. It's hard because Norwell will be there this year, and then you have AJ Can at that right guard spot, or you can go and take a look at some of the other guys that are still available. I think Wyatt Davis makes sense here, but I think Tylan Wallace probably is the better fit. It's very tough. I'm back and forth on this. I think they're going to go Wyatt Davis if they are here. You kind of hedge yourself for the future, just considering that Andrew Norwell will likely be gone after this season, just considering where his current contract sits. So for Jacksonville, making sure that they kind of hedge it and protect themselves up front. I really like that pick for them, considering he did kind of tumble in this mock draft, which was, I deem pretty realistic at that point. And now we're still going through that third round. Let's take a look at what our big board looks like. Tylan Wallace is now off the board. Kenneth Gainwell is still available. He goes now too. So that was a guy I definitely was considering with that next pick, just considering that he could be an elite pass catching back at the next level. Now we're sitting here at 106. Now there's wideouts that are possibly still on the board. Chatarius Atwell. I know a lot of people like Chadarius. I think he could be a pretty solid receiver at the NFL level. Des Fitzpatrick was another guy at the Senior Bowl who was really, really impressive to me. Absolutely lit up the Senior Bowl. But I got to look at that running back spot as well, because at this point, you need to have a backup running back. Currently, as it stands, Carlos Hyde is the second back in that offense, James Robinson being the first back. I think Trey Sermon makes a lot of sense with the selection. Chadarius Atwell could be another option. Let's take a look at that interior. Tyler Shelvin, he's definitely a two-down defensive lineman. He's not going to be able to be that third down rushing D tackle to me. That's just based off of what I've seen thus far. At the edge spot, Dimakaji is still available from Duke. I'm not super pumped about what's still available at edge. I think it makes sense for Jacksonville to have a back to spell James Robinson. James Robinson had a ton of usage last year, and I'm surprised that he was not injured at some point in the season, I guess. So Trey Sermon out of Ohio State is going to be the pick. I really like this for Jacksonville, just considering you have to have a back that can spell James Robinson. You cannot continue to roll into the season with a Carlos Hyde, backing him up for the season. Now we're at pick 130, also their fourth round pick. And I think Seth Williams makes some sense. I do think Seth Williams could be an option. Once again, Des Fitzpatrick is still here. Let's kind of look at the big board as a whole. Cameron Sample. I think Marvin Wilson could make some sense as well. Kind of looking at that corner spot. It's kind of tough. There's a couple of guys that still remain. Chuba Hubbard, if we could have held off on Trey Sermon, that might have made some sense around this neck of the woods. So we're going to actually go up. I think we have to have another wide receiver ready to go in the fold. I think obviously Colin Johnson is going to be competing for that fourth wideout spot. I think we're going to look at corner one more time. Trey Boston from Oklahoma makes some sense. Rodarius Williams as well. I also like Kerry Vincent Jr. I do think that he could be an interesting option for them at this spot. But we are going to go ahead and go with Des Fitzpatrick. I think he's being a little undervalued in a lot of these mock drafts. He had a phenomenal Senior Bowl week and did really, really well at the actual Senior Bowl game. So Des Fitzpatrick will be the selection. And that concludes our 4-round mock draft. Thank you so much for tuning in. Please subscribe if you did enjoy this video. Also, leave a like if you enjoy seeing these team mock drafts. It really helps us see, what should we be putting out there? And those likes are a good indication that you like our content. So thanks for tuning in, and we'll see you in the next one.